Welcome to episode 4, Wrinkled Wisdom. Today we get to sit down with Sheriff Bob Songer. He's a constitutional sheriff, and he's adored by so many people in Klickitat County. It's a rural county in Washington State, and there's a lot going on there, believe it or not, with such a small population. And he's going to talk about programs he has going. He's going to talk a lot about what it means to be a constitutional sheriff and the impact he's had on the community. And really, he's had impact on other sheriffs across the nation, and he's going to talk about that. I know that you'll enjoy it. I think it's great to see things through law enforcement's eyes. And once again, just like and subscribe our channel. Please help drive these stories and get them in front of people. I think a lot of people get a lot of value in them. We're getting great feedback, and I'm so thankful to be able to do this. So please enjoy the interview. I appreciate you coming. The drive from Klickitat County. So,
well, it's my honor because I get a chance to talk about constitutional sheriffs and what the role of a sheriff is, an elected sheriff.
I like that.
And I've been a police chief before in Elko, Nevada for 4 years, and now I've been sheriff going on 10 years as an elected sheriff. And I can tell you there's a distinct difference. As a police chief, you serve at the pleasure of the mayor or the city council. And if they don't like what you say, you're gone. That easy. They can let you go for no cause. Now, some chiefs have contracts, so if they're let go for no cause, they pay off the rest of the contract. I wasn't that bright in Elko. I didn't have a contract. But I lasted 4 years until they got a new mayor, and they got a new chief. That's how that happens.
Yeah.
But no, as an elected sheriff, the distinction is, even in our blue state of Washington, under the Second Amendment, the sheriff is the top chief executive officer of the county. And his only boss, and what he swore an oath to, his only boss is the people he serves. It's not the governors, not the Board of County Commissioners, it's not the president, it's the people at Klickitat County. And my job as a constitutional sheriff is to intervene when somebody's rights are being violated. And that could be being violated by bad people, victimizing them, or it can be violated by government. And it doesn't matter whether it's local government, when I say local, city, county government, state government, or federal government. And I've got several examples as we get into this, where you intervene. When government's overstepping and violating the Constitution. Now, you'll have some people say, well, the state legislature passed the law, and Sheriff, it's your duty to enforce the law. That's true in part. But the problem is, if they pass a law that conflicts with the state constitution or the U.S. Constitution, then that's an unconstitutional law. It's a bad law, and I don't enforce it.
I like that. I'm glad you brought that up. So it's funny. I was sitting, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I was sitting up visiting my grandparents in Glenwood. And I remember all of a sudden, here comes Sheriff Bob Songer on Fox News.
Yeah.
And, everybody, there was kind of an uproar there in Washington about these new gun laws. And I think, I'm not real familiar with the law, but I know one of them was you couldn't purchase a semi-automatic rifle. Well, the 10/22, which was a semi-automatic rifle that every kid that I grew up around learned, at a very young age, you learned gun safety, you learned everything.
Hunting, so forth.
Yeah. And I know that was a bit, what was your, I guess, to get into that, I guess we'll just get into it right away.
Sure.
Man, it gives me chills thinking about it because I just picturing growing up in, such a small town America and how big of a deal that was. And I guess my first question would be, what is your personal characteristic that you have that you stay so driven to the people to protect them? Have you always been that way or?
No, not always. Early in my career, like most law enforcement officers, it's a state law and you must enforce it. That's what they're taught in the academy. And for years, that's what I did. And as I got older, and more experienced in the management in the law enforcement, it dawned on me that, and really what brought that about, to be quite honest with you, really where I got into it heavy, is I-1639. And of course, I stood up against I-1639. I said it was unconstitutional, it violated your Second Amendment rights. And of course, not that the Attorney General Bob Ferguson or Inslee care what I have to say, but anyway, I stood up against it real strongly. And then there was another gentleman that stood up against it. He was a police chief out of Republic, Washington.
Oh, yeah.
Named Loren Culp.
Yeah.
And Loren works for me now.
He ended up running for governor.
Governor and Congress. Both.
Okay.
And now he's my chief criminal deputy.
Oh, great.
So
you got good recruitment skills.
10-4. I keep those conservative guys close by.
Yeah.
But anyway, because we stood up against that, the two of us, we were invited back to Mesa, Arizona to get an award by Sheriff Richard Mack, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. And I don't know if you've heard of Sheriff Mack.
I have not.
If you Google him, you'll be impressed.
Okay.
This gentleman, his focus is to get sheriffs across the United States to be constitutional sheriffs. Now, a lot of them are, but you have some that come up from the old school. You know, if it violates the law, the legislatures, then we're going to have to enforce it. No, you don't. Sheriffs have the ability to, and all law enforcement officers, in fact, have discretion in enforcing the law. Because if you didn't have discretion, every time you stopped somebody, they'd get a ticket, right?
Right.
There'd be no verbals, there'd be nothing. And you do have discretion. And so when it comes to, that's what I use when it comes to unconstitutional laws, that I view as an unconstitutional law, where it's clear that violates your rights, like 1639, which they've even enhanced more since then. And so when you stand up against that, you're going to get pushback. You'll get pushback generally from the far left and some Democrats, not all Democrats, but some. And there are people that believe you shouldn't even own a gun, shouldn't have a gun. And by taking your guns away, that'll solve all problems.
Yeah.
Well, the fact is it'll only solve problems for the bad guy, because the bad guy is going to continue to have guns, and the honest person who needs to protect their family or their livelihood or whatever will not be able to have those under these unconstitutional laws.
Right. What do you have a belief of why they're doing that? Do you think it's in good faith, or do you think it is to take power away from the citizen?
Oh, absolutely. Take power away from the citizens. In my humble opinion, and you can see it on the national level, but all these blue states, the same thing. Yeah. They want to turn this country into a socialist country, Marxist.
Yeah.
Where the government there'll be one government. Because I'll ask you, think about this. Fortunately, it hasn't happened yet. But President Biden requested, 67 or 87,000 IRS agents to be armed. Why in the hell would an IRS agent have to be armed to check your W-2 form? No, there's a bigger scam there.
Oh, yeah.
And if you took if he was successful, you took the 87,000, whatever it was, that number, of IRS agents armed, and you put them with the rest of the alphabet, the FBI, DEA, ATF, Homeland Security, you got a pretty good-sized national police force. And there was a guy back in the 30s that started that called Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
And once they got control over the nation, and they'd probably recruit local agencies to join in if they wanted to become federal agents, and this would be a mess. It'd be run by one law enforcement agent. That's only my opinion, but I think the handwriting's on the wall where they're headed with this, if they're successful in turning this country completely into a social society.
Yeah, I would agree, because it takes your opinion. You say it's a humble opinion. I think it's a fair evaluation, because you understand what they would be capable of, and you have to operate with some sort of paranoia when it comes to survival, and especially when it comes to your rights.
Absolutely.
I just had a lady on. She was born in. You talk about Hitler. She was born in Manchester, England, in 1934, and her childhood was in. When the Germans were coming in, and they're just vicious people, and that's what it is. They were helpless. Where That was kind of the beauty of America, is that we there's a lot of power sitting in households right now that can keep us
Oh, yeah.
safe.
I had kind of an older gentleman of Klickitat County there. He came into my office one day and he said, Sheriff, I've got a Glock and it has a 17-round magazine. Now, they have this magazine band out where you can only have 10 rounds in a magazine. Excuse me. And he said, so if I load it only with 10 rounds, would I be in any trouble? I said, you don't worry about that. I don't care if you got a 30-round magazine.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get arrested for that here.
Right. Well, I can tell you what, I know they appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
The majority of them that I talk to in Klickitat County, it's something. So going back on protection, one of these signs that I remember that you had up, it said, what was your slogan? It was, if you do drugs, you're going to jail, right? Or something.
Yeah. Well, the one I got up now, and I still got more to get up.
I like that.
But it says, warning, and it says, if you're dealing drugs or use drugs, better get the heck out of Klickitat County. No, I said hell out of Klickitat County.
Yeah.
Or we're going to throw your butt in jail. And so it was interesting bringing that up. Yeah. I had a reporter from Gorge News. She was at one of my town hall meetings here last month. And she says, well, Sheriff, isn't it true there's only been 2 drug arrests in the last couple of years? I said, well, that's partly true. And I said, but let me answer that for you. Because of our woke, far-left legislators in our state would not allow us to arrest for hard drug possession. So if I stop somebody, let's say, for example, and he had fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, meth, could not arrest him. I could seize the drugs, hand him a counseling card, put their name in the system. Now, if that guy he had 3 bites of the apple. Well, if we stop that guy 2 more times after that, same thing. We'll take a 3rd time, we could write him a misdemeanor citation. And the prosecuting attorney by law was requested to put him on diversion. So what you got is the state of Washington authorizing these people to run around and use hard drugs. Now, I could arrest them if they caught them dealing, but here's the problem. If you can't arrest them for possession, in many cases, you have to have the ability to flip that individual, make him an informant to go up the chain to get the dealer. And that's done pretty easily if they think they can get a pass on their possession charge.
Right.
And so it really damaged law enforcement's ability to clean up drugs in our county. And well, that was across the state. It just wasn't our county.
Yeah. So what's your opinion, or what's your belief about why do they do this? Because it's not, and I think you'll relate with me on this. And why do they do it not only with like human predators or human, drugs and things that are, I would say, of the predatory nature on humans? Why do they do it also with animals, like reintroducing grizzly bears and wolves? like why is it they're doing it on the wildlife side and with the human side? Like, have you ever thought about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you have a belief in that, or why that?
Oh, I got a strong belief.
I like it.
In 2019, state law under Washington allows the sheriff to use hounds to hunt predator animals, cougar, bear, bobcat. But there's certain requirements. Now they have to be endangering livestock. They have to be making a public safety problem, whether around your backyard or something.
Yeah.
And or if they're attacking your domestic pets. Cougars have a habit of hauling the dogs off and cats. But under those conditions, I can authorize, and I have 5 hound handlers, they're posse members, that go out. I call them, and they go out, and I have a memorandum of understanding with the Washington State Game Department. Now, we get along fine with the game wardens. It's a biologist that we don't get along too good with. But we notify the game department. We got a call. We're sending the dogs out. And we invite them to go with us if they want to go with them, the hound handlers. But they're shorthanded, and a lot of times they're not able to. They just don't have the staff. So we go out, and when the hounds tree a cougar or corner a bear or whatever, we euthanize it. And anyway, then we call the biologist, and they come out and they get their tooth and blood samples and so forth. And it's been a pretty successful program. I've been challenged by the Cougar Foundation in a lawsuit type thing. And fortunately, they tried to file it in Benton County, and the Benton County judge looked at it, and he looked at the RCW, and he said, sheriff can do what he's doing.
Yeah, good for you.
And that didn't make him real happy, of course.
Yeah, I'm familiar because we've had cougars out on our place. I don't know if you're familiar with my grandparents' place in Glenwood. My grandpa owned C&H Logging for a long time, there by the refuge, and we have cougar. I've been very close to a cougar back in there, but I know that they've asked my grandparents to go after some cougars that have been harassing the cattle out there, and then we see, not to get too far off subject, but just I don't know if you're familiar with the grade. If you look across there, my family has property there. If you're headed towards Glenwood, and we'll find where those bears are just stealing cougar kills left and right. They piggyback off each other. They're scavengers just like, anything else. But yeah, I know that what you're doing there, I know a lot of people really appreciate it because about like any predator, if you let them free, they just multiply and just keep doing damage.
Well, I've had pushback, like I say, from some folks because of our program. But what I tell them, the biologists, wildlife biologists, their job is to protect livestock and so forth. Protect wildlife, deer, elk, bear, cougar. But I said my job is public safety and to protect the given rights of the citizens on their property. Now, cattle's their property. Their domestic pets are their property. Their kids are their property. And I said I never want to be in a position where I have to knock on somebody's door and say, yes, we found little Johnny down by the Klickitat River, half eaten by a cougar. Yeah. And that is a distinct possibility.
And people don't think that happens that often. Well, I mean, we can look at just in the last few years how many cougar attacks there's been. Yes. And, in Glenwood, way before I was born, I think my mom was young, there was a girl eaten by a bear. Yep. Yeah. And it's, it does happen. So do people think that those predators don't get involved in your personal business? They're there.
To them, it's just food.
Yeah.
They don't rationalize whether it's human or deer or whatever. It's an opportunity and it's food.
Right. So if we could go back, I'm curious what year were you born in? Where were you born, or what were you born into?
Yeah, I was born in 1945, June 25th. I just turned.
Oh, there you go.
79 here the other day.
Yeah, happy late birthday.
Yeah, but anyway, I was born in 1945 in Grand Island, Nebraska. And I was raised for about 11 years in North Platte, Nebraska. Then my dad was a mechanic by trade, and we had, there were 6 of us kids. And they moved out to Washougal, Washington, Camas, Washington, actually. And he got a job as a mechanic there. And so I was raised between Camas and Washougal, basically, because we had a house for a short time in Washougal.
Yeah.
But I was going to both schools, Washougal School, and then when we moved to Camas School. And I got to tell you that I got kicked out of high school, both of them, and they wouldn't even let me back in.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for anything other than fighting. I'm a little guy, so, you have to tend to protect yourself. And maybe I was too eager in doing that. But in any event, I was kicked out, couldn't get back into either school. By this time, I'm 17, and I fibbed about my age and had got on the green chain at one of the logging mills there in Stevenson. And while it was on the green chain, and if you've worked the green chain, you know that's a lot of hard work. You're pulling that timber off there all the time. That lasted about 2 months when I decided this is probably not my career track. So my buddy and I, we were over in Vancouver, and we stopped by the recruiting office, talked to a Marine, and he looked sharp, and by the time he was done talking to us, we was ready to charge a machine gun.
Yeah.
17 years old.
Yeah.
And so I go home, and I got the paperwork from the Marine Corps. And, of course, at 17, my dad had to sign for it. And he says, well, I'm going to tell you something right now. He was Army Air Corps, got shot down over Germany. He and 2 others got alive out of a 10-man crew on a B-17.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, He says, I will not sign for you to go in the Marines. If you want to wait till you're 18, which was like 6 months, and that was forever,
Yeah.
then you can go in on your own. You'll be 18. But if you want me to sign, I'll sign if you go in the Air Force. So I go over and talk to the Air Force recruiter, get the paperwork, brought it back. And he said, what did the Air Force recruiter tell you? He said, if I play tennis, I can take tennis rackets with me. They have an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Yeah. My dad just smiled. Signed.
Yeah.
There was none of tennis courts or swimming pools.
Yeah.
So anyway, I get into boot camp, and at the time I thought, what in the world did I get into? And because they talk mean to you and all kinds of stuff, but I look back on it, and that was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And then when you got into the Air Force, what was your title, or I guess what was your, or is it secret? No.
Okay, now think about this. Here's a young man, 17 years old, kicked out of high school twice, right? They made me a clerk.
Oh.
So I clerked for the first sergeant. So they sent me to typing school, and I learned how to type. I got my GED when I was in there, in the Air Force. And I was stationed at McCord Air Force Base here in Tacoma, Washington, for the whole tour. I spent 3 months in boot camp, then the rest of the time I was at McCord. And it was a great job. It really was. Me and a buddy went over to sign up because the NOM was starting to heat up a little. And we could get $50 more a month if we were in the country over there. I mean, we were raining.
Yeah.
So we go over and sign up. They shipped him off to Wiesbaden in Germany, and I stayed at McCord Air Force.
Oh.
Apparently they thought if we signed up, there might be something wrong with these two guys.
Yeah.
But anyway, I get about 9 months before I got out of the Air Force, I realized I was not going to make the Air Force my career. It would have been a good career, but I just didn't want to make it a career. I was married by that time and had one child, and if you re-up, you're bound and determined to get 1 year remote tour. So I said, I don't think so. So I went on my own in Tacoma Tech and got certified as a welder, certified welder. And so I had 30 days leave. I took my leave at the end of my tour, of Air Force tour. Took my leave, went to work at Lockheed Shipbuilders as a welder, making big money then. It was $3.65 an hour.
Yeah.
And all
something?
the overtime you wanted to work because they had government contracts.
Yeah.
So I took a day off, went back to the base and got my discharge, and then went back to work in welding. And I always had an interest in law enforcement. And in 1968, we were living in Washougal at that time. And there was a police officer sitting out front running radar. So I went out and talked to him. And I said, what's the chances of getting on to the city police department? And he said, probably not very good. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're not tall enough. And I said, oh. But he said, you can be a reserve police officer.
Yeah.
So I did that for a couple months, and I had to get a different welding job. And anyway, there was a break there, and then I came back in 69, back as a reserve in Washougal, and spent a year there. And in July of 70, I was hired on by the Clark County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, great.
Deputy. They didn't have a height requirement.
Yeah.
They had an age requirement, and you had to be 25 because the sheriff at that time didn't figure you had enough life experience if you didn't have 25. And, of course, being prior military helped. But funny thing about it, before I got that job, I called the Washington State Patrol. And I laugh about it to this day. I said, I'd like to put him to be a trooper. First thing out of his mouth, how tall are you? I said, well, probably 5'7" on a good day.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you won't qualify. You got to be at least 6 foot. Oh, okay. He said, however, if you had a bachelor's degree, you could be 5'10".
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, I'd have to have a doctorate in order to.
Yeah. You better get a PhD if you're 5'7". Yeah. That's funny.
So, of course, those things don't happen anymore, But
yeah, that's funny.
but most agencies were 5'10" or above.
Uh-huh.
So
Is that because of the physical like altercations and things like that back then?
that was a mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a mindset. Yeah, they looked at my school record. They'd know I could fight. So but anyway, anyway, I got on at Clark County and patrol. Ended up in detectives.
Did you work with Dwayne Dewey?
Oh yeah.
Dwayne Dewey, gives me chills. I owe a lot to that man. I spent a lot of time with him growing up. A lot of long drives out. We used to go gold mining together, and he just what a great human. I just admire him.
He and Marlene.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, he's one of my posse captains.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. He's not doing real good though.
I know. It's sad. It's it's people like him is why I'm doing this, because I was lucky to spend a lot of time with him growing up, and just so many life lessons and wisdom you get just from helping him cut firewood, and he'd just be telling you stories, and that's great. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that.
Oh yeah, we worked. He was on Vancouver Police Department, and I was on Clark County. Yeah, we worked together quite a bit.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So you've been in law enforcement for 50 years, over 50?
Going on about 56 right now.
Wow.
By the time I'm done with my third term, I'll be 2.5 more years to go. I'll be right at nudging 58 years.
Yeah, that's something. Good for you.
Yeah. It's been an experience.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry to interrupt your story there.
Well,
I wanted to kind of touch base on that. Just wonder, because I admire him. So starting out you became a detective, you said?
Yes, I worked as a detective, worked property crimes, burglaries, and so forth. And, of course, if you ran into narcotics, you worked those cases as well. Was involved in several homicide investigations. But then I moved up to, while I was a detective, one of the other detectives, Frank Conico, I don't know if you've ever heard of that name, but he's a full-blooded wine guy, just a heck of a great guy. And not only I considered Frank a friend, but he was going to run for sheriff. So I jumped in to support him, campaign for him. And anyway, it was a pretty nasty campaign. And I was at a Barberton Grange out there in Clark County one night, and I had the candidates up there for sheriff, and it got really heated. They had people running for legislature also talking, but the cameras didn't come on until the sheriffs got up to speak. Poof, you had Channel 6, 8, and 12, and all of them up there. And one of the, they tried to pigeonhole, they do that in campaigns. Conico said, "Isn't it true, Mr. Conico, that at one of your fundraisers you had a felon attendant?" And he said, "Well, it's possible. I mean, we sell tickets. We don't do background checks." And but it upset me at the time, and so I raised my hand, and the other sheriff, incumbent sheriff, Sheriff Cotton, he looked down. He kind of avoided me for a while, but finally it was obvious. He said, "Yes. You have a question?" And I said, "Well, I kind of have a question, but it's more of a statement. Didn't your chief criminal deputy get busted for snatching a body?" And pooh, boy, the lights went off.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
And so I was put on administrative leave, and the day the polls closed, I got a knock at my door, and they terminated me. Untruthfulness, which is nonsense. It was just a whole litany of stuff. So I turned my badge over and got on all that to Lieutenant Doug Ray. It wasn't his fault. I mean, he's following orders. And so we all went to the Clark College for the voting returns to come back in. And anyway, Frank won. The incumbent sheriff lost. And Frank said, "Bobby, don't worry about it. You got a job."
Brought you right back. Good for you. So I got to ask, so I guess if you don't, it's kind of a hard question, but when you were a detective, I know that you serve the people, What was the most? Was there a case that you can talk about, or something, or a situation that you remember that was the most impactful to you for what you did for the family or the community?
Yeah, well, there's a number of cases, but because I got pretty personally involved in probably about 7 homicide cases. But there was one case, and by that time I was a chief criminal deputy. If you've heard of Wesley Allen Dodd,
I don't
where he
think so.
killed 3 kids there in Clark County, molested them and then murdered them. 2 of them were near brothers, were murdered in Vancouver Park. And then a little boy out of Portland was abducted by the name of Isley, 5 years old, 5 or 6. And his body was discovered down in Laframsboy Road down by Vancouver Lake. Little nude body laying there in the weeds. And we were out there, and Pheasant Hunter found the body. So we were out there, and because he was out of Portland, we had Portland police involved as well as the FBI across state lines. And, of course, our detectives and Vancouver detectives. In fact, Dwayne, I don't recall, but he very well could have been involved.
You know, not to change the story, but he was. I'm 90% sure, because that's one of the stories he told me that affected him.
Yeah. And anyway, I mean, you can imagine the community there was up in arms. You got 3 kids that have been murdered. Well, at Camas Theater, there was a guy getting some popcorn at the concession stand, and a subject come walking out of the theater portion of it across the lobby, and he's got this little boy in his arms. And we'd been doing teaching in the schools of, holler if you're not my dad or something like that. And the kid did. He kept screaming, "You're not my dad." I mean, obvious. And the guy getting popcorn, "Hey, what are you doing?" And Dodd dropped the kid and took off running. Well, that citizen, of course, he didn't know who he had, but he chased him down and held him there because Dodd was trying to get away in his car. Held him there at the car, and Camas police got there. And, of course, they started putting the dots together right away. Camas police called our unit. We came over, our detectives. And in about 2 hours, he confessed to the 3 murders.
Oh, man.
Willing to take him to his apartment. and they wasn't going to go on consent. They went ahead and got a search warrant in case he tried to recant later. And they seized photos where old Polaroids where he'd be committing sex acts with a rope around this little kid's neck.
Oh, my God.
I mean, it was sick. And anyway, he confessed to it. He went to jail. We had him in Clark County Jail. And not comical, but his attorney, of course, is telling him to keep his mouth shut, right? He couldn't. I mean, he wanted, because it was national news, you had people, media there from everywhere.
Yeah.
And he was just shooting his mouth off while the prosecutor's writing down all these notes, because that can be used in trial. And but when he went to trial, he pled out. He pled to the 3 homicides and stuff. But I will have to say that is a pretty good case of rehabilitation, though.
Yeah.
Because they hung him.
Yeah.
He's not committed another crime.
Right. It's
as you might tell, I'm pretty firm on death penalty case.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of like we were talking about earlier with like predators. It's sad that those people exist, but they do exist, and
Yes.
and it's there's no you can have all the empathy in the world, but it seems like we're getting to the place where everybody wants to have empathy for the predator, and it's like where are we at for protecting the prey anymore? The people, and it's people like you that.
Well, yeah, that goes right to the point. You're making a good point there. What's the scream and holler now? Defund the police, prop up the criminal.
Yeah.
Make it easy on the bad guy. And it's like if you're raising kids, if you reward their bad behavior, what do you get?
Yeah.
More bad behavior. And Seattle, Portland, they can go into these markets, bum rush a market and steal all kinds of stuff. Zip. In fact, Seattle, if it's under $700, they don't even prosecute them. And we have several deputies that off-duty work some security at some of those stores. And he said, "Bob, if they wheel out a cart that's got $500 worth of stuff, We're not even contact them, can't contact them.
Isn't
Store
that
policy and also the prosecutor, and because the police can't do anything, they can arrest them, but if they don't prosecute them,
yeah, it doesn't do you any
yeah,
good.
no,
And then it's just taking up the police officer's time where he can be doing other things.
Yeah.
Well, it baffles me. That's one thing I'll never figure out is what is the mentality behind that, those operation tactics with society. It's either to destabilize it or I don't know. What do you have a belief in that?
yes, I think even if it's on the local level like that, I think it's part of the master government plan to defund the police, make laws against criminals pretty much useless because they won't prosecute. And what you're moving toward is a government society, a socialist society, where the government rules, period.
Yeah.
So law enforcement, it kind of takes a back seat to that. And it's kind of off subject a little, but still on point. If you think about it, COVID.
Yeah.
COVID was nothing in my mind, not to say it wasn't serious, or you notice nobody had the flu during COVID.
Yeah.
It was always tested COVID, money involved.
Yeah.
And you could walk into a restaurant, you had to have a mask on, and then you sit down, you could take your mask off.
Yeah.
Because that virus only travels at a certain level.
Yeah.
Being a short guy, I didn't have to worry about that. Yeah. But anyway, that's the kind of nonsense. And it was more controlled
Yeah.
than it was anything else. When you tell people you cannot attend church, you cannot wear your mask, you got to wear a mask. You got to be more than 6 foot apart. Where in the heck does government get off telling you what you can do with your own life as far as your medical and that type of stuff? And I would not enforce COVID. And I had some people screaming, "Oh, you're causing people to catch COVID and die," and all that. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
I told troops and stuff, if you want to get a mask, wear it. If you want to get a shot, get a shot. But if you don't have to.
Yeah.
And it's an individual choice, not the government.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people appreciated that. I know it, just even like in Glenwood, in that, small town, and since it wasn't really being enforced, but you'd have people coming in from Portland because they were on lockdown. So they were like, oh, well, let's go to this town of 400 people. But then they'd be, flipping attitudes in the stores because nobody's wearing a mask. But at some point you have to look at it and be like, where did common sense go? And also I appreciate that you take that point where people get to make their own choices. And, and I, unfortunately I know people that passed away from COVID and stuff like that, but they made their own choices. That's kind of that's the whole thing about life is like you do make your own choices sometimes, and you get the repercussions of them or or whether it's good, good outcome or not. But isn't that kind of the beauty in life?
That's your choice.
Yeah. I appreciate that because that was something. It's weird looking back on that. What a wild time. Especially what they did with religion. People need those faith-based values, and some people need that every week. And it's
you bet.
Especially to keep it goes back to those morals too. You talk about like letting the criminals go free. It's like that's kind of the idea behind a lot of religion, especially Christianity, is like those moral values of being a good citizen and a good person. And it seems like there's a common theme with kind of some of that.
Well, I came out of the courthouse one Sunday, and of course I wasn't wearing a mask. I wouldn't wear a mask. But I came out of the south doors where it goes to our jail lobby, and I was in uniform, and I heard this church music. And there's a church right across the street, but it was closed down, and it was on a Sunday. And I heard this music, and went around the corner of the courthouse, and here they had a flatbed trailer sitting right in front of the courthouse, and they had their instruments on there, and there was about 15 people standing next to you, no mask, singing away.
Yeah.
So when I approached toward them, of course, I could see I was in uniform. And the minister, who later turned out to be Rod Smith, now is one of my posse members. But anyway, when he come around the corner, he says, well, I suppose we're in trouble, Sheriff. And I said, no, keep right on.
Yeah.
And I joined in.
Yeah, I bet you did.
I did.
Yeah.
And then because, now some churches chose by their choice to follow the mandates, but because they were willing to stand up and take a chance of being arrested for an unconstitutional, in my mind, dictate from a governor.
Yeah.
I joined their church, so that's where we go now. River.
Oh, great. Yeah. So when you look back on that, like, do you think people that supported that kind of stuff? So, do you think they're afraid of accountability, so they want the government to control them a little bit, so they have somebody to lean on? Or do you have a thought on that?
There is that thought out there. Well, they've drank the KoolAid for years.
Yeah.
So what they're thinking is, if the government says it, then that's what you got to do. You got to follow whatever they say, just blindly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no real thought goes into it, and unfortunately, in my opinion, there's a lot of people have no clue what their constitutional rights are.
Yeah.
They don't teach it in school anymore. And all that nonsense they teach in schools now, there's all this woke, far left stuff going on. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's definitely some indoctrination.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I get rambling on here. You can stop me.
Oh, no, you're all right.
In fact, we received a notice from, it came through the Attorney General's office, U.S. Attorney General, Garland, a little weasel.
Yeah.
But anyway, it comes through him that they wanted FBI agents to partner up with local authorities, sheriffs, police chiefs, so forth, and attend school board meetings and watch for domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
So I wrote him a letter back. I said, "You keep for that reason. That's the reason the FBI, because we work with the FBI too. But if they're coming in to do that, they stay the hell out of Klickitat County." And I said, first of all, parents get up and they holler, they upset, as long as they're not being assaultive, threatening. I said, that's a First Amendment right. They have a right to do that.
That's right.
But you got some of these school board members, they get all excited and they feel threatened. Well, if they're doing their job, they might not have to.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, sent it back. I'm sure one of his staffers looked at it and just threw it in the garbage can. But I told him we would not enforce it.
Yeah, good for you.
And so those churches that followed the guidelines, that's their call, it's their choice. But I think it wasn't right for their attendees of the church. Now, if you ever get a chance, the little gal, Chris Ann Hall, constitutional attorney,
Okay.
professor actually, and she's got one on sheriff's duties or something like that, and it goes through that whole history, and it talks about a couple churches, and one was in New Mexico. So what the sheriff did in New Mexico, which is a constitutional sheriff, he deputized all of the members of the church.
Oh, yeah.
Because law enforcement was exempt.
Yeah. Oh, good for them. They're good at, we're good at, conservatives are good at finding those loopholes too. Yeah. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So living in a community like Klickitat County, what values do you really appreciate about that type? Because I mean, Klickitat County, I don't even think they had a 3-colored stoplight until like 15 years ago in the whole county.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very rural, it's a great place.
I think they may only have 1 or 2 right now.
Yeah, I think there's the one by the Hood River Bridge, and I think that's it. That might be the only one.
Yeah.
But yeah, what values do you love about that area?
What I love about it is God-fearing people that believe in God, believe in conservative, common sense thinking. They don't believe in this far woke nonsense, which is destroying our society, in my opinion. And that's what I love about it. It's a good community to live in. We're getting more and more people moving in from Seattle or Portland, and unfortunately, they bring their politics with them sometimes. And then they try to get on school boards or city councils or whatever. Then they start spreading that nonsense. But by and large, Klickitat County is a pretty red county.
Yeah.
And
I would say so.
and they have been good to me. I've been so blessed to be the sheriff of that county. 13 years prior to getting elected sheriff, I did the contract job with the sheriff's office for a range timber deputy,
Oh yeah.
Simcoe Mountains along the Yakima Reservation. We got a good relationship with the Native Americans. In fact, I cross-commissioned the inner-tribe along the Columbia River to help out our deputies and stuff. And I also cross-train or cross-commission city police officers. So if they're out in the county, they can make an arrest out in the county.
Oh, good.
Because they got my commission. But we got a good working relationship with the city police, the state police, the game wardens themselves. Just a number of law, and the Washington State Patrol. Sergeant there in charge, Nate Hovinghoff, outstanding individual. But when you have a rural county, you have to have that kind of accountability.
Oh yeah.
And get along. And law enforcement does not have a problem getting along with each other. There's none of this turf, kind of territorial type stuff.
Right.
And no, I'm real proud to be part of that county law enforcement.
Well, I think from my feedback, like from what I've heard from people, they're pretty proud of you too. I think, it's I've never met you, but it's weird because I just feel like I know you because everybody, they talk about it and they're proud of what you're doing, especially these people in these small towns in multiple ways. They can see what you're trying to do to help them out as a community. I wanted to ask you why you're here, since you've been in law enforcement for so long. Have you watched trends with like crime? Like when you evaluate trend change with what I'm thinking more on the youth end. Mm-hmm. Do you see, because I've wondered about this with like video games and social media and all of this, do you see kids getting in less trouble as kids and more trouble when they're young adults, or, compared to like the 90s when everybody was out partying all the time and drinking and driving? Is there any trends like that you've evaluated, or have things?
And I would say I'm not a real expert on that at all, other than what I observe in my own beliefs. I think one of the problems is the phones and the iPads and stuff like this. They got their nose buried in it so much that, and some of it's not good stuff they're going over. And a lot of times parents, because both parents have to work or whatever, that's kind of a babysitter for them.
Yeah.
These kids getting involved in that. But I would say juvenile crime in our community is not through the roof or anything, but it's there. I mean, there's juvenile crime. And unfortunately, the biggest thing is drugs.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a bad deal with these drugs because the guy that dealing those drugs, a lot of these drugs, is no different than the guy put a gun to your head and shoot you.
Yeah.
Because he or she is not going to care whether you die over it.
That's right.
All they're interested in the profit they make off of their drugs. And of course, the users, some of them will get enough drugs and they'll sell part of their drugs. I don't consider that heavy dealing. And I've worked in narcotics. I was in Clark County, a sergeant in charge of the narcotic and vice unit. And we worked a lot with Portland and Montgomery County and all these agencies. We had a Clark County Drug Task Force. And I can tell you, I've arrested over my career, I bet well over 1,000 individuals for drug violations. And heavy drug violations like heroin habits, $200 or $300 a day habits, where they got involved in one case where they got involved in the bank robberies because they had to get money. And there were no condition to go out there and work for their money.
Yeah.
But they had to make quick cash. But that, and I've heard for years, well, we're losing the war on drugs. Well, damn right we are, because we've never had a war on drugs.
Yeah.
If we were serious, if this country was serious about a war on drugs, we know exactly where the cartel lives. We know where their labs are at. We have intel. You go in and you bomb them.
Yeah.
You wipe them out. And those caught bringing on large quantities across the border into our country, they're a death penalty.
Yeah. That's why China doesn't have a drug problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think China, if you're a drug dealer, it's...
Philippines the same.
Yeah, death penalty, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad because it's so sad. You hear just in the last few years, even at, I'm at the age now where I know people around my age where their kids are teenagers or, are starting to get into their 20s. And I know multiple people where their kids have overdosed. Some of them, a lot of them are accidental overdoses, where they get laced with something or.
Right.
And what advice would you give to like youth or parents or, I mean, the military, you talk about how that was some of the best. I know a lot of people that get off of drugs do try and go into the military and things like, as long as they don't have, they're not a felon or anything like that, they go. But if you could give advice or something like that to the youth, what would you say to them to stay busy and stay aware?
Well, I would, it's too bad and they can't do it in the schools, but faith-based, we started that, indoctrinate them into that. Faith-based and what drugs would do to you, and before picture, after picture. I mean, there's gals that's 30 years old, is a meth head, fairly attractive young lady. 5 years later, showing, and she looks like she's in her 60s.
Yeah.
No teeth, sunken in, abscess all over her and stuff. That's the kind of life. And I think if we had more education in that area, especially at the younger stage when you're forming that in their minds.
Oh, yeah.
Because, they get up later in teenage years, if they haven't had that kind of background training and understanding, they get pretty independent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're not telling me what to do. I'm going to do this my way. And it's sad because when you have drugs, you have a lot of crime associated with it, property crimes, violent crimes. We respond to a lot of domestics, and when you respond to domestics, there's a good chance either booze on board or drugs on board or both, and that's a lot of problem. That's some of the problem there, and it's a very dangerous situation for officers responding. In fact, Tim Neer, one of our deputies, responded to a domestic here, 2 months ago, and the mother was having problems with his 30-some-year-old son who was living with her, prior drug addict, but he had some mental issues going on as well, mental health issues. Wouldn't take his medication. That's another problem. And anyway, he come charging around the trailer and charged the deputy, hit him in the head with a hammer. And we almost lost that deputy.
Oh, man.
But they were able to get him to the ground. Even the deputy got hit, was able to get up and help the other deputy get him down and cuffed up. But, he was in ICU for a week, I think it was, and longer.
Oh, poor guy.
3 days.
Wow.
Yeah, but anyway.
That's too long, though.
Yeah, and he's back full-time working.
Oh,
so
good.
We've been very blessed that way. But the drugs are the biggest issue. Now, I'm not against drug treatment. I think that's fine. I think that should be a program that's offered. But I think drug treatment ought to be a year-long, faith-based, and they just can't come and go. They're there. It's nice quarters, not a jail, but they're there, and give them a year to dry out. Give them a year to go through these programs. Why to stay off of drugs and stuff. Because drug court doesn't work.
Yeah. I've heard different ideas with stuff like that about having farms and things like that, or, you welded, give somebody some
trade.
Yeah. Give them a trade or something where they're going to get their dopamine fix from some sort of trade that you can, turn into a life. I think that's what a lot of them are missing out on. And it's unfortunate you see so many kids that it's like, I know, like where parents fail them, and that's so hard for me to see. And it's where I wish we could do something about that. They're
raised in a family where the parents are drug addicts,
right?
So that child doesn't stand a chance.
Yeah. I hope that I like what you said there, that we've never had a war on drugs. I've never even thought about that.
No, there's too much money involved, too much graft. Mexican authorities paid off. And there's probably some United States authorities that are paid off.
Oh, yeah.
So money talks, and it walks. So.
Right. So with all those years, like in the diverse background in law enforcement, what's like some values or like when you reflect, What's some things that you just truly appreciate about your career in law enforcement? I'm sure there's lots of things, but
yeah, it was racing through my mind. Bottom line is to be able to help somebody.
yeah. Have you ever had a moment where people have thanked you for when when you've gotten them in trouble?
I had a guy in Clark County there. I was patrol at the time, and it was raining like heck in Hazeldale. And he had a tail light out. And being a young deputy,
Yeah.
I'm not scared of the rain. Of course, it rains over there all the time.
Yeah.
So I pulled him over, and as he's getting out, I see him throw something on the ground. So, and it's still drizzling out and stuff. Well, it was a matchbox, and it was dry. I mean, it hadn't been sitting out in the rain. Open it up, and here's several bundles of heroin. So anyway, I bust him for the heroin, right? And he said he needed help, and yada, yada, yada. And you hear that from a lot of times from people. When they're caught, that's when they need the help.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing a search warrant on his place with his cooperation, and we seized some more heroin and marijuana, and there was some other stuff there. And he ended up going to prison. So let's fast forward. I think he only did a couple of years, but let's fast forward about 6 years after that. I get a knock on my door, and I was living out in Hazeldale at the time. And I opened the door because I'm always armed, because you make friends sometimes in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so I opened the door, and the guy looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I had seen him. He says, Bob, do you remember that you arrested me for heroin? And he said, it was out in Hazeldale. It was raining. I said, yeah, I remember that. He says, I want to thank you.
Yeah.
So I did remember that, and that's happened on several occasions.
Yeah.
You don't get a bum rush all, a bunch of them coming to you.
Yeah.
But you do get a few people that seriously appreciated you helping them out.
Yeah. Isn't that something, how rewarding that is, helping people? That's one thing I just wish, what we've talked about this, Wayne and I've talked about this, like that's one thing we've continuously gotten those stories since I've been doing this, is people talk about just, with, 70 plus years experience of life, they bring up these moments where some of their favorite memories are helping people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I hope we can, I continue to do. And I hope the youth and just anybody really understands, even just volunteering or doing something, how it is, you need that, it gives you everything. And I couldn't imagine because the contrast of what you've seen of, where people in their worst, and then coming after years where he could have been a victim. He could have been,
right.
He could have had a bad attitude towards you, and how much that meant to him. And
well, I had
that's really something.
Another situation where we were talking to Don Dummy. This is when I was a range timber deputy. I end up arresting a guy for stealing firewood off timberlands. And so he had to go back to his house to tell his wife that he was going to get booked in, right? So that was out there, and out by Ponderosa Park. It'd be north.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
North on Highway 97 there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Out in that general area. So anyway, I get him there, and she comes out. Of course, she's in tears. He's going to jail and all this stuff. And there's 4 or 5 little kids there, and it looked like they hadn't bathed in a day or two. And anyway, I followed him in the house. He wanted to change a shirt or some damn thing, if I recall right. And I looked around, and nothing there. And she went to get the kids a glass of milk and opened the refrigerator. Nothing. I think butter. So what I did, I'm getting emotional when I think about it.
Yeah.
When I did, I got him booked. And he didn't appear to be druggy or anything else. I think he was just selling firewood to get money, even though he shouldn't be stealing it. But so I went to the store and bought $50 worth of groceries and stuff and took back out. After he got out of jail, he and his wife both come to me, I think.
Yeah. I bet. I think people miss those stories, that we see so much of law enforcement getting a bad rap, especially like you said, you see it on the left side. You always see on the liberal or the Democratic side of the news or the media trying to show all these bad things law enforcement do. And if there's one thing I've seen that's been nice about some things about social media is lately I've seen a lot of videos of veterans or these people that get pulled over, by they get pulled over for some reason,
right?
Drinking and driving. And then, the law enforcement instantly realize, whether they're wearing a veteran's hat or have it sitting on the dash. And then I've seen multiple where the guy, just needs somebody to talk to and and then they really help them. And I think that's, I sure hope that going forward, we see a lot more of that. And I think we will.
I have no problem putting real bad guys in jail. In fact, it's kind of enjoyable sometimes.
Yeah,
But you don't have to arrest everybody, and you don't have... Well, for example, why would I go out here on an unconstitutional law, taking guns, 1639, flashing back to that, go out here and arrest somebody because now it's illegal for them to be possessing a certain gun, but they're not a convicted felon. They're just a hard-working, good citizen, or some young man learning to hunt for target practice. Go out and ruin that individual's life, literally, by getting booked in, getting a felony record or some kind of criminal record. For what? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so, to me, if I view that view that as unconstitutional, I am not going to enforce it. I have the discretion, and I will not enforce it. But I've had people tell me, well, Sheriff, you don't have a choice. It's up to the courts to decide whether that law is unconstitutional. I said, yes, you're partly right. Ultimately, it will be up to the court. But in the meantime, I have discretion whether I make arrests.
Yeah.
And if I view that law, it doesn't take a mental giant to figure if they're violating your rights.
Yeah.
Those amendments are pretty clear. And if I figure it's violating that right, I will not enforce it. Why would I do that?
Right.
You get, for example, Rosa Parks, black person on the bus. You're not in the right seat. And they were arresting people for that because that was the law at the time.
Yeah.
For years later, heard by the U.S. Supreme Court, they deemed it an unconstitutional law. So in the meantime, how many people was arrested and violated their constitutional rights?
Right. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so nice to know. It's nice to, I've one time I got pulled over by I can't remember if he was a sheriff or a city police there in White Salmon. And one time I got pulled over and I can't remember what I got pulled over for. I was coming down the Underwood cutoff and he pulled me over and he took he's like license and registration. And he took, it's going to make me emotional. He took my license and he saw my last name and he was like, "Are you related to Tom Hoodenpile?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was my uncle." And he's like, "I responded to that accident."
Oh, wow.
And he handed, and you could see him and he handed me my license. He didn't even do anything just because he understood that, there's just a bigger picture going on than that kind of stuff. And it was just such I remember that was really one of my first, I think I might've been in high school, one of my first experiences. And so I've always kind of had this, appreciation for law enforcement because of that moment. It's amazing what those moments that those stories get told and told and told, and they need to get told more so people can appreciate law enforcement a little bit more, I think, because they have the toughest jobs. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. Yeah,
but I feel blessed. I mean, there's been ups and downs in my career, but I feel very blessed that I've enjoyed law enforcement. I enjoyed the work with the people, the citizens.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I got elected in in 2014 and took office January 2015, one of the things I did is create a community policing program, Sheriff's Posse.
Yeah.
And we're up to about 164 members right
Oh, are
now.
you really?
Oh, yeah.
Good for you.
And we want to cap it at 200. But anyway, through that posse program, these are good citizens. And we do a background to make sure they're not convicted felons and child molesters or anything. We clear them that way. But these are from all ages. You got them 17, 20, not 17, but 18 on up to 80. Ron's 80 years old. And they all come from a vast background of information. In fact, one of our legislators, pardon me?
Gina.
Yeah. Don't hold that against me.
That's all right.
Yeah, one of our legislators, Lori Gina Mossberger. Anyway, she was one of our posse members.
Yeah.
Or is one of our, and she fought in legislature on getting tougher enforcement.
Yeah.
When they took the drugs away, we couldn't arrest for drugs. She fought to get that back, and so did the citizens at large through an initiative.
Yeah.
And then we're able, now in June we're able to pursue. So if your car was stolen, now we can pursue it.
Yeah.
Before, no, can't go after it.
Yeah. I had a police officer tell me about where, like, if somebody was attempting to snatch a kid, and let's say they didn't take the kid, and they could be like, and somebody saw them, it could be like, it was that guy wearing a black shirt and white shorts, and they weren't allowed to go looking for this person. Is there truth to that?
Yeah, basically.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. No.
So with this posse, I'm curious about this posse because I remember when it started. What was the mindset behind that? Was it because I know you're managing? For people that don't understand, Klickitat County is a huge county, and there is nooks and crannies that people never see.
That's right.
And that posse, you'll be out in the middle of the woods somewhere, hunting, and there goes a posse. Remember?
Yep.
And what was the mindset, I guess, behind that? Because it's been very effective.
Yes. When I first formed the posse, it was around that time, and you could fact check this. I think Governor Inslee declared Washington State a sanctuary state around that time. Might have been like 2013, 2014. So when I formed the posse, oh my God, the libs just hair caught on fire. The sheriff's running around with his posse going to hang immigrants from Oak Tree. No, that's serious. They were talking that nonsense. And that's how bizarre it got.
Yeah.
But over time, when people realized that was nonsense coming from that direction, now we have requests for posse members to help out. They do home checks, on vacation home checks. They do all of our traffic control at events, rodeos, 4th of July's, communities, parades. So that it's a working posse. It's not a ceremonial posse on horses and going down the street in a parade. These folks, women and men out there, and I've got several that are retired law enforcement from other agencies.
Yeah, like Mr. Dewey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have 5 divisions. We have a West End division, which Dwayne is part of, because I wouldn't, even though he's got health problems, he's still part of that posse.
Yeah.
Then I have 3 divisions in Central, Goldendale, Lyle, that area. Then I have 1 division out in Bickleton.
Okay.
So they're spread out through the county, and each division has a captain, lieutenant, and 2 sergeants. And so we have monthly training with the posse. And Franny and I went to a convention for the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association in Vegas. Was that in March? Yeah, it was in March, because we went to a different one after that. But anyway, we went to that convention, and my role for speaking at the convention was our posse. And I've had requests from sheriffs out of Texas, Minnesota. In fact, We're flying over to Casper, Wyoming on the 8th and return on the 9th, but we'll be speaking to a liberal group, and not liberal group, my slip of the tongue there.
You should be. Yeah.
We're speaking.
They could use a few more people like you speaking in front of them.
Yeah, but it's a patriotic group formed there. And the lady that asked me to attend, her husband, I think, is a state senator. I don't think he's U.S. senator, state senator. And so they want to know about the posse. So I'm going to provide them all our policies, procedures.
Oh, good for you.
Stuff. And because they want to get their sheriff to look at maybe doing something like that.
Yeah.
And our posse, they do the courtroom security. Because if they're posse members in that role, then they have a commission, a special deputies commission, with a limited arrest authority. Because under Washington state law, when an inmate's in court, he cannot be shackled. So if you got Billy Bad Guy in law in front of the court, like we've had several double homicides, that type of thing, and they look over at the door and look around, and they go to make a break for the door, they'll get tackled by that posse member and held there until they get other help coming. So anyway, the posse, they do that. They do prisoner transports.
Yeah.
They assist. They go along with a regular custody officer or a deputy and do that. We're looking at forming a program where they'll also serve civil papers that do not require a full-time deputy to do. Some civil papers require a commissioned deputy. Man,
that is so smart to do. Like, because then it keeps the other law enforcement officers focusing on the right stuff. And
exactly.
I know, like I don't know if you went to the Glenwood Rodeo, but, but so my grandparents' property, so where they live, it's just west of the rodeo grounds.
Yeah,
that's their farm or part of it. But, but yeah, that's their house across the creek there. Yeah. They're just to the west by the timber. But so we kind of, when you go home and you run around Klickitat County and you see the trucks with the posse magnets on them and stuff like that. What a great way to show that law enforcement is involved in your community, and they're everyday people. I don't think they don't treat law enforcement as much like everyday citizens, but they are. But with that posse, you kind of there's so many of them out there now. It's like, oh, that person was over for dinner at my grandma's last night, or something like that.
Well,
it seems like
that's my Uncle Joe.
Yeah. What a great thing to do, and also for the kids to see it.
Yeah.
Man, that's a genius.
Speaking
thing.
of that, we have established. It's about 3 months old, something like that. It's a posse scout program, 10 to 17 years old.
Yeah,
and we'll have training for them. Teach them how to. Well, they have fun with it. Have fingerprints, how to lift it.
Oh yeah,
everything. Survival techniques. And one of the things we really want to get them is teach them about government. What is city government? What is county government? What is state? What is federal? What's your constitutional rights? And they get little constitutional books we hand out to them and read that stuff. Because a lot of that they don't get in the schools anymore. Yeah. Unfortunately. But and of course the parents have to sign off to have them part of it and all that. And a lot of times the parents are there with them, and so it's a good deal. Oh,
good for you. Yeah, that is. I hope that takes off across the country. Yeah. Good for you. That gets me excited. That is what a good thing for just communities and kids. And hopefully some of these, I know going back on the 1639, you got some like national.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there was some spotlights on you.
Oh yeah.
And how many sheriffs reached out to you? Because I know I've watched like some of it, and you see maps where it's like Washington all of a sudden. There were so many sheriffs that followed you. I imagine you'll get probably the same feedback from this system that you've created for these rural counties across the country.
Now, some of them, I believe, have started their posse program. Some of them had a posse program. Maybe not to the numbers or the extent that we've got, but they certainly could build on that.
Yeah.
And Jim Raymond,
I don't know.
He's your Franklin County Sheriff. Bubba.
Oh, that's a good name for a sheriff.
I'll tell you what, though, constitutional guy.
Yeah.
Very good sheriff, outstanding. Bob Udell, sheriff out of Yakima. another good sheriff. Benton County Sheriff, he does a pretty good job.
Yeah.
I don't know him real well, but I've met him a couple times. Now, they had a posse going for a little while, and I don't know if it's still going, but I think it was a regional type thing. I think Franklin was involved, Benton County, and it might have been Yakima County also. But I have 5 posse members, or 5 or 6, that live in Benton County. And they're my posse members. And they said, well, do we have to live in Klickitat County to be a posse? I said, no. If you want to come over and volunteer, we welcome it.
Oh, that is great. Good for you. I'm so thankful to have you here because I really appreciate everything you do. And I know my brother-in-law works for you now, Zach McBride.
Oh.
And he's a late law enforcement. I think he's my age, 30. He's 36, I think, when he started, and I know he's just loving it, loves working for you.
And I can tell you, and I'm not just telling you that because he's your brother-in-law, outstanding deputy.
Yeah, good.
Yep. In fact, we have to go through the process, but to my knowledge, he's the only one that's so far has shown an interest, being a canine handler.
Oh, yeah.
And we had one of our posse members donate $60,000 to buy another canine dog.
Oh, wow.
Because the one we have right now, he's a profi character. He's going to be, we'll probably, if we're good, we'll have about 2 years or more. Not much more than that out of him before I'll have to retire him out. And he'll go retire with the handler. Go live with the handler.
Yeah.
But, so we're in the process of getting the dog out of Europe is where we got profi. And it's dog handlers, and that's what they do for a business. And they got to get a certain attitude, and he's not a German Shepherd, but he's Malinois. Yeah, Malinois. I always twist it when I say it.
Yeah.
But just a beautiful dog. Kids can crawl all over him and pet him. But when he goes to work, he goes to work.
Isn't that something?
And he doesn't have a nickname of Mike Tyson for no reason.
Yeah. Isn't that something? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What time are we at, Wayne?
We're at 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, we're probably getting towards the end of our memory. But before we sign off on this, is there any like life advice or something like that you tend to share with people that you wouldn't mind sharing with us, or like just?
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem. Follow the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Really. You follow the 10 Commandments. Treat people like you'd want to be treated.
Yeah.
Now, we know in the real world that is not always going to be the case. There are some people that are just plain bad because they want to be bad and they don't care about your rights or care about your life or your family's life. There is some real bad people out there. And that's where the enjoyment of law enforcement comes in, is taking those people down.
Yeah.
And getting them out off the streets where they won't be hurting society. But faith-based is number one.
Yeah, I like that.
Because no matter what we do in life, that big guy up there, he's got your number. He knows what you're going to be.
Yeah. You're not the only one looking out for everybody. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming out here and everything you've done throughout your life. I know I'm not directly tied to it, but I believe I know what it takes, and I can tell you that I really appreciate it, and I know I could speak for my family that we really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Well, it's an honor to be here and talk with you guys.
Yeah. We're lucky we get to do this.
Yeah.
I really, this was a dream of mine for years. And like I said, growing up in Glenwood and Klickitat County, where the majority of the population, especially where I lived, was the older generation,
Right.
because the young kids, there wasn't much work and they,
Right.
They left, but everybody's grandparents still had, their homes that they either were born in. My grandma was born in Glenwood,
Yeah.
and lived there she's 87, and hopefully she doesn't get mad at me for saying that, but but it was just, there's so much wisdom out there in the stories and back then, Glenwood's still a town with no cell phone service. Times kind of stood still there a little bit.
Right.
Then I've been out and I've traveled a lot, and the most consistent regret I've heard in all my traveling was that people regretted not getting their family stories. And it took me years, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to make that so it's possible for people. And so we're really so lucky, whatever they say about technology, I'm so happy to have you, drive out here a couple hours, and we get to sit down here in our studio and get so much great stuff out of you.
Visit. Yeah.
Yeah. And visit. Yeah. And you can come back anytime. If you ever want to come back, you just holler. Yeah. If you have something coming or something you think about later on that you want to share. And
well, one of the things, I know we're probably running short on time, but one of the things we're embroiled in right at the time is they want 2 of the 3 county commissioners are in the process of taking the jail over and having it run by the county commissioners, which those 2, Jake Anderson and Lori Zoller, don't have a clue what they're getting into. They wanted to contract originally over to Oregon at Norcor, at the Dells. And I won't get into a lot of detail, but the bottom line on March 29th, and this is political, March 29th, she announced public meeting, no comments, no questions, but by April 12th, now keep in mind this is March 29th, by April 12th, we will be moving the inmates over to Norcor. By the end of April, we'll be shutting the jail down, and the union is negotiating, the county's negotiating with the union for 16 employees severance packages because they'll be out of a job by the end of April. Boom. Nobody knew about it. City of Goldendale, Benjamin White Salmon, nobody had any clue that they were thinking about contracting with Norcor. So been in the business a while, I kind of smelled a rat, so I called the Sheriff Brad Lowry out of Sherman County, and he got a hold of the Hood River Sheriff because both of them sat on the Norcor board for law enforcement. Norcor Correction Facility is a regional facility in the Dells that housed prisoners from several counties in Oregon there. So anyway, they came over on April 10th, 2 days before we're to move our prisoners over there. And they met in my office, and I said, I understand by, kind of jokingly to them, I said, I guess we're going to have to move our prisoners over to Norcor there in 2 days. They both looked at me and smiled, and Brad leaned forward and he said, Bob, they do not have a contract with us. They're not even close to having a contract with us. In fact, he said, if we put it on speed dial, if we were going to contract them, put it on speed dial, it would take them 6 months to get a contract. And I'm thinking, well, hell, they just lied to us. Because we're under the impression they were actually negotiating with the union to do the severance packages and stuff. So I'm thinking, what's it? But I know what it is. Jake Anderson, he's one of our county commissioners 2 years ago. I tried to get him prosecuted for a juvenile beer party at his illegal Airbnb. And Walla Walla, my prosecutor over in Klickitat, he and Jake are pretty close. So he sends it over to the prosecutor in Walla Walla to look at it and decide whether he's going to prosecute Anderson. And I don't hear from the guys, crickets, don't hear a word. About a month, and I was told by officials there in Walla Walla, he's not going to prosecute that, Bob. And I said, what do you mean he's not going to prosecute it? Laid out there. I have his own confession. And he said, I'm telling you, he won't prosecute it. I said, why? We can't get him to prosecute anything. Besides, he's retiring in a month or 2. Well, he wasn't going to take that. So finally I get a letter from him, a good month or 2 months later. Never called to ask about it, the case. Well, I have determined that Mr. Anderson did not buy booze for these kids. I never said he did, because the law, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, there's 2 portions of that law. You violate either portion, it's a violation of the law. If you provide a facility, backyard, barn, anything of your property, you allow illegal activity to occur, like a juvenile beer party, then you can be charged. And anyway, long story short, he didn't get charged. It didn't mean he didn't do it. He just got away with it.
Yeah.
So he's on the board. He's not going to run again. So he'll be gone in January. But he'll stir it up real good in the meantime.
Yeah.
And Lori Zoller, the other one involved, I got to admit, she played me pretty good. I even voted for the gal. I thought she was going to do a good job. And she's got that defund group,
Oh, boy.
defund the sheriff's office. Some of the I call them my, what is it, fan club.
Yeah.
That they just hair catches on fire anytime some. But anyway, they have her ear, and this mean sheriff, we're going to show him by God who's in charge.
Yeah.
And she has a hard time understanding that the sheriff works for the people, not for the Board of County Commissioners. So,
Yeah.
so that's where it gets into the politics, and it goes on and on. But I came out with a press release based on what I was told by these sheriffs, and they did not have a contract, by the way. That bared out to be the truth. And I said, well, the county commissioners are either incompetent or they're lying or both.
Yeah.
And of course, it stirred it up a little.
Yeah.
So,
So you got to keep your jail.
well,
You still have it, or?
yeah, well, so far, it looks like they're going to go ahead and take the jail over themselves, which is done in about 5 counties already.
Okay.
Clark County was the most recent. Benton County
Oh.
also has. The sheriff doesn't run the Benton County jail, nor will I once they take it from me. But the main thing is, even if they take it over, it's going to cost them a bundle to do it that way of taxpayers' money, when they could just leave it in the sheriff, make some improvements that we've been asking for a nurse for a long time to be stationed there. No. But now they're talking, since they're taking over, they're talking about having a nurse in there and all this stuff. And what that's going to do is drive up the cost of them taking it over, which is still cheaper than contracting with Norcor. Because even if they contract with Norcor, anybody arrested in Klickitat County would have to be booked in Klickitat County and medically cleared in Klickitat County before transported over to house. So you'd have 2 facilities, basically. You're paying for bedding, plus you're paying for a part-time jail here.
Yeah.
And then you got to transport these people for court and all that stuff. Nonsense. What I'm concerned about, whether they take it over, and they're not going to leave it under me, I know that. So if they take it over, at least the 16 employees will still have a job.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. What I'm concerned about, however, they're going to go backdoor it for defund the sheriff's office. They'll call it necessary budget cuts because we have to, we don't have the money to beef up the jail budget now because they're going to have to do a lot of spending on that. And so it put us in a position, they cut us hard enough, we'd end up having to lay off deputies. And of course that affects services to the citizens out there when they call and deputy can't respond. We'd be forced to basically to go to emergency responses only or backup in progress crimes. If it's a cold burglary, cold vandalism, go on the computer, click, fill out the report, send it to the sheriff's office. And that's not good service. That is not, because some of those calls you get suspicious activity. If we don't respond to those and if we're cut real bad, we may have not to have the deputies to do that. That's suspicious activity. It could be a burglary in progress, somebody going to get hurt.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah, you don't know what could happen.
Yeah.
That's the thing with those incidents. You don't know what could happen,
Yeah.
especially if you're dealing with somebody on drugs or, who knows what.
Or mental.
And especially with a place like Klickitat County, there's a lot of space there. I mean, you need to have all the deputies you can. It's not a quick trip anywhere.
Here's a clue. Over 20 years, it's been over 20 years that the county has not hired one additional deputy. Over 20 years. Now, if somebody quits, they backfill the position, that type of thing. But I mean adding to the force. It's been over 20 years. In that time, our county population has gone up to 23,000. large county, as you mentioned. Crime rate has gone up because the population has gone up. We have Wishram Heights, they have the Indian housing up in there. We're responsible for that, but there's no money paid to the county for that. So I asked one of the candidates, her name is Kitchens. What's her first name? Amanda? Yeah, Amanda Kitchens. She's running as an independent. And I explained that to her during one of our meetings. I said, well, because she said, when she got done talking, she said, you got any questions? And I raised my hand. I said, yeah, let me make a statement first. Over 20 years, we haven't had one deputy added. The crime rate's going up, population. I said, now, if you get elected county commissioner, would you defund the sheriff's office? She said, oh, no. She's on the list for defunding the sheriff's office.
Oh, got her.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've done some detective work in your day.
Yeah. Been through a couple elections. I know that.
Yeah.
But no,
It's
she's
interesting.
extremely liberal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. I don't know why anybody can understand how valuable law enforcement is. I mean, I don't know what the deal is. But
Well, I think it's a national movement as well as you get into these blue states and it's the same playbook that the nationally.
yeah. I think it's going to turn around.
Oh, I do too.
Yep. I think so.
I'm praying it is anyway.
Yeah. Well, you and me both. Especially raising, raising daughters. I have 2 girls and stuff like that. You want them to be as safe as possible.
Absolutely.
And, they're not out getting kicked out of school for fighting like you. They're on the other side of that. But
Well, I got more than a GED.
oh yeah. Oh, did you get your degree?
I've got a master's degree in criminal justice out of the University of Portland and been through 2 law enforcement, Washington State Law Enforcement Academy, Nevada State Law Enforcement Academy, and the FBI National Academy in Conico.
Good for you.
So I did get away from fighting all the time.
Yeah. I guess before we let you go, I guess since I'm going to try and get all the advice out of you I can, what would you say for like an aspiring young kid that wants to maybe get into law enforcement? What advice would you have for him or her?
I would just suggest if they're not 21 yet, I would suggest they target criminal justice classes, administration of justice, 2-year degree, 4-year bachelor's or whatever, and start preparing their resume basically to get into that. If they're 18, 19, there are departments that have programs where they're kind of like our posse program for kids, but it's called different programs for some agencies where they can get involved. We had a cadet program in Clark County, we called it, and they would get credit for serving as a cadet in the sheriff's office. And they answered phones and they did various other things for the department. It kind of gets them acquainted with the departments and a background and education on that. That would be my advice if they want to get into law enforcement. Start early. If that's something they really want to do, start early. And if they're 18, see if they can go for a ride-along with some of the sheriff, get involved that way so they kind of get an idea of really what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's good because I think my daughter's friend, even though she's 10, she really wants to be a cop. She wants to be a dog. She wants to be a canine cop. So I'll make sure she sees this. But before we let you go, I wanted to tell you thank you so much. It really means a lot to me for you to take the time out of your busy schedule and to come down here and.
Well, it's my honor.
Yeah.
Serious.
And I'm glad. I never thought I'd be in a position where I get to interview a sheriff instead of the sheriff interviewing me. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. You bet.